The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and we have for you our colleague Adrienne Earley from ODOT's Office of Environmental Services. She's the Waterway Permits Program Manager, and she will be talking to you about current and future Ohio EPA 401 permitting requirements. We hope you have lots of questions because Adrienne is here and available to answer those for you. For this morning's webinar, we do have a copy of the slides in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. You're welcome to download those, but if for some reason you can't, don't despair because we will send a follow-up email with a link to the slides as well. We do ask that you please enter questions into the question box throughout the webinar. Once Adrienne has completed sharing the information, we're going to open it up for Q&A, and she's committed that she will stay full length of the time that's needed and even possibly do a second webinar if you have lots and lots of questions. So I think that is all I had, Adrienne, so I'm going to turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and I'm going to give this brief webinar to talk about some kind of some hot topics, some things with the 401 regulations that may or may not be obvious to the regulated community out there. So it is pretty focused, and I'll get to a quick little topic agenda here. Okay, so we're going to focus today on the nationwide permits, the 401 water quality certification requirements. And even so within those, I'm going to specifically talk about stream mitigation and aquatic organism passage as it relates to culvert requirements. And then we'll move on and touch on the future, actually in the near future than we probably, time flies, and 2026 is around the corner. So we're going to have new nationwide permits in 2026, going to get a glimpse into those. And then what kind of helps give that glimpse is ODOT's regional general permit that has is in the final stages of being reauthorized. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with some permitting tips and strategies. I guess first, real quick, I want to mention that ODOT, has a funded position at Ohio EPA, and we regularly meet with them and have partnering meetings and work collaboratively with them. So we have a very good relationship, and with that affords us, a lot of that collaboration back and forth being state agencies. So there are some things that, we here at ODOT can have some insights into that other members of the regulated community might not. Okay, so I know we have a broad audience, and I just feel like I always have to throw this kind of basic regulation 101 slide in there. But for those folks that don't live and breathe the Clean Water Act, this is just a quick breakdown of what the Clean Water Act looks like in terms of 401 and 404. So our section 404 of the Clean Water Act is regulated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they're the ones that put out the general permits, and we're going to be talking about those nationwide permits, but they also will authorize any regional general permit. ODOT has one. Other entities can also work with the Corps to get those as well. And then individual permit approvals for the more significant projects. And then as far as the state certification goes, that would be under section 401, and Ohio EPA regulates that part of the Clean Water Act. The states have the ability to either just automatically certify a general permit like the nationwide's, or they can add additional requirements to those. So Ohio EPA has additional requirements, and those are the things we'll be talking about today. And then also they authorize individual 401s and director's authorizations, but I won't be covering any of those today. But those are obviously for bigger impact projects. Okay, so with the current nationwide permits, there's two sets of those, and they were authorized in 2021 and 2022. 2022 is the one that contains a lot more nationwide. So mainly the ones that we use here at ODOT, or a transportation entity might use. So nationwide permit 3 or 14. So maintenance or linear transportation projects are the two main parts of the nationwides. So within the nationwide permits, there are general limitations and conditions that apply to all nationwide permits. And those are the things that, mitigation and some of those culvert requirements that I'm going to talk about, that's under those categories. So Part G, Section C addresses mitigation. And back in 2021, when the Corps published the current nationwide permits in the Federal Register, they changed the approach to stream mitigation from a linear footage approach to an acreage-based approach. They actually never had a linear threshold in their rules. So this is the first time we saw that back in 2021. And the 300ths of an acre found its way into the nationwide permits. Originally, they public noticed it with a bigger a threshold, a bigger acreage for stream mitigation, and then it found its way down to the 300ths of an acre, which really is not a very large amount. So in order to meet the automatic certification of that nationwide permit, to not have to go to Ohio EPA for any kind of approval, if your permanent impacts exceed this 300ths of an acre of stream impact, then you're not meeting the general limitations and conditions of the Ohio EPA certification. Now, what was not intuitive, and I'm going to, so this in the purple box, that's language directly out of the 401 certification from Ohio EPA, what was not intuitive to the regulated community, and I can specifically say not to ODOT. And you would think, if we're regularly communicating with Ohio EPA, you would think this would be known, but it was not, that this 300ths of an acre would only be a mitigation requirement if we had to notify the Corps or EPA. If we had to go to them for a specific permit approval for a project. When in fact, that is not the case, that Ohio EPA expects applicants to mitigate for these stream impacts, even when there's no submittal to the agencies that is required. So we actually found that out in the spring of last year. And, I think it was pretty clear that we were not knowingly doing that. But, we expressed also to EPA that there was really, to not have an enforcement mechanism to that mitigation. I think it was safe to say that, there's probably quite a few applicants that weren't doing that. So that's that. I just want to put that out there. I've talked about it in various other forums, environmental update meetings, and with our ODOT district staff. So if that's news to you today, I guess, surprise. All right, so I'm going to move on and talk more about the general limitations and conditions, and I'll come back to the stream mitigation topic. So there's a section in the current nationwide permits under the 401 certification that talk about culverts and culvert requirements on intermittent perennial streams. And essentially, this section is to ensure that culverts are installed in a manner that substrates and aquatic life and flows can pass through them sufficiently. And this is the current language. So any culvert that's greater than 36 inches that essentially is not on bedrock, or the slope would be less than 1%. The Ohio EPA would like to see those culverts bottomless or buried. And then additionally, they asked for the bankful discharge to be able to pass through these culverts effectively. And that's approximately at at a 2-year storm event. So, you know, here at ODOT, we were easily doing that. You know, our L&D manual took care, volume 2 took care of that. So you can see some of the language here. You know, they talk about when practicable. You know, that's kind of a term that we would see. You know, maybe there are times where we here at ODOT kind of took advantage of that if it was or wasn't practical, since practicable, since that's a somewhat of a subjective term. But really, EPA, Ohio EPA wanted to see these things occur when these conditions were met. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk about what's coming. So the current nationwide permits, like I said, they'll be expiring in 2026, March 14th to be exact. So the Corps will initiate the reauthorization process sometime this year. Usually it's going to be, you know, late summer into the fall, and they'll put out a public notice document for review and comment, and there'll be a comment period. And then following that, Ohio EPA will initiate their public notice process. So be on the lookout for that, and the goal is to get the Corps' requirements and the Ohio EPA certification on or before March 14th of 2026. I do want to mention that if a project is under construction, under contract, in advance of March 14th, 2026, the nationwide permits allow 1 year for those waterway impacts to be completed without having to get a new authorization. So that's a really great thing about the nationwide permits that ODOT's regional general permit does not have. So take advantage of that if you can. Okay, so moving on to kind of what's going on here at ODOT with our RGP and looking into the crystal ball of the nationwide permits that are coming up in 2026. So we have gone through quite a process this go around on our regional general permit to get this reauthorized. This is our 4th iteration of the RGP. And this by far has been the most active, challenging, and time, you know, time level of commitment for RGP that we have ever had. There are new requirements for notification and mitigation for stream impacts. And there's also new requirements for culvert design to facilitate the passage of aquatic organisms. So I certainly can't literally look into a crystal ball and say what's going to definitely be in the nationwide permits, but Ohio EPA has indicated that, especially for the aquatic organism passage and the culvert design topic, that the requirements that are in our new regional general permit will find its way into the nationwide permit. So that is a pretty big reason why I'm talking to this group today. Okay, so we now have a notification section in our regional general permit. I know that the nationwides also have that as well. So the nationwides require notification to Ohio EPA when you impact a Category 3 wetland, or you have impacts greater than or greater or equal to 1/10 of an acre of any wetland, if you otherwise are not notifying the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So there are cases where that can happen, and mainly that's going to be under a nationwide permit 3, which is the maintenance. Now, what is not in the nationwide permits is a notification trigger for permanent stream impacts exceeding 3/100 of an acre. So here's where this 3/100 of an acre pops up again. You know, this is not something we really wanted to see come out of this, but it's really the only way for Ohio EPA to ensure they're getting mitigation when it is required. So having a mitigation requirement, as I said previously, when there's no notification or mechanism for Ohio EPA to verify and enforce that, it really just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't want to, again, I don't want to speak for Ohio EPA or say I know this is a fact, but I would not be surprised if this notification requirement ended up in the nationwide permits in 2026. So heads up on that. Just keep that on your radar. They haven't specifically said that, but I would anticipate that happening. And I also want to mention that the Ohio EPA has certified the RGP, but we're still waiting on the Corps to wrap their part up. So we'll have a final RGP sometime in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, so there's that 300th of an acre that is new. Okay, so a little more on the mitigation. So this is what, again, these are the requirements, the language exactly out of our regional general permit that you might see potentially exactly the same in the 2026 nationwides. So as we know, this compensatory mitigation requirement for wetlands, that is already in the nationwide permit. So, I mean, usually there's going to be some type of PCN requirement if you're exceeding a tenth of an acre, but there are circumstances that the Corps will not have a PCN requirement, even if your impacts are over a tenth of an acre. And that really would be under the nationwide 3. So Ohio EPA still expects mitigation under the nationwides when that occurs. But like I said, this is our RGP. So we're talking about RGP here, trying to get some insight into the nationwides. So this is the new portion here having to do with compensatory mitigation when our discharges, our permanent discharges to streams exceed the 300ths of an acre threshold. Okay. Now, this part underlined is extremely important to ODOT, and if we didn't have this, it would be a lot of notification and mitigation to Ohio EPA. But this is one of the things we ask for is, hey, when we have existing fills, when we're doing a maintenance project, you know, and we're replacing that fill, we're essentially saying we don't think we should have to notify, we don't think we should have to mitigate. And so they added this language in here that essentially reflects what we asked for, thankfully. So, and it actually does apply to all parts of our RGP, not just RGPB, which is maintenance, which is similar to Nationwide 3. So we are able to essentially avoid really hundreds and hundreds of notifications to Ohio EPA with this language being inserted into the certification. So that was a very big relief. It took a lot of meetings and a lot of back and forth with Ohio EPA to get to this point, but it was time well spent. And then this is a little different, number 3 and 4 than the nationwides, because Ohio EPA has stream rules now. I don't know, a lot of you out there might be aware of Ohio EPA putting stream rules in this was this past July is when it made its way into the Ohio Administrative Code. And then also number 4 addresses the mitigation rule that banks would be preferred and then followed by in lieu fee, but also those credits would need to be approved by the interagency review team that operates banks and in lieu fee programs across Ohio. All right, moving along. Okay, and then sorry, I know you guys is a lot of words, but I really wanted to show you verbatim what it says in our RGP, because these are things that, like I said, you'll be seeing in the nationwide permits likely. So here's some changes in the culvert requirements. So we still have that 1% slope. So if you have a greater than 1% slope, you know, a lot of these things will not apply. One of the things that our hydraulic engineering office expressed to the EPA is when we install larger culverts, it could create, you know, you have more water moving downstream, and depending on the surrounding land use, you could have some damage to downstream properties. And Ohio EPA was sensitive to that. So if we could demonstrate that that could happen, they could agree that these items might not be applicable. We've yet to do that yet, so I can't really speak to how that's going to go. All right, so here we go. For new and replacement culverts, they have increased the culvert size to greater than 48 inches in diameter. So actually that is a benefit, whereas previously it was 36 inches in diameter. So that is helpful. Now this is where things get a little more complicated. For new culverts, you don't have a culvert, a crossing on a stream existing. You're adding a trail, you're adding a new lane or a whole new roadway alignment. This is where the Ohio EPA is wanting to see a larger culvert size and wanting that culvert to accommodate bankful width, not just bankful discharge. So that's a pretty significant upsize in the culvert. They have also, one of the things our hydraulic engineering office wanted to see was utilizing some stream simulation methods and models out there that there could be cases where a bankful width might not be appropriate. So there's some wiggle room in there to demonstrate what would be appropriate for a particular stream on a particular project. That's why those methods are spelled out. It's not just a bankful width option. And then finally, when we do have perched culvert situations, we have committed to addressing those somehow. So we have a perched culvert. We're not planning on replacing it, or excuse me, it's not a new culvert scenario where we might have some maintenance. Mainly, it's going to be like a maintenance scenario. So we have an extension, or we're going to line it. There's scour situations going on. They want to see us finding ways to address those. So those scenarios look. Actually, I'm going to advance to the next slide. Well, no. I'm not going to do that, sorry. It was previous slides back, but when you have those perched culvert situations where aquatic life is not able to effectively move through the culvert, substrates are not effectively able to move, and flows could be affected as well, they would like to see us address those, and we're currently developing ways to do that. We have not fully done that, but I believe it's going to be pretty basic, like, adding substrate to fill in those like scour holes at the culvert outlets. Okay, so these last three items are pretty consistent with either consistent with what's already in the nationwide permits and our regional general permit, or nothing that we are not already doing, but I just still wanted to include them on the slide. Now, all these updates, if you're working with ODOT on a federally funded project, these updates are going to be in the July L&D Manual Volume 2 update. So look out for those. We'll be working with hydraulic engineering up until then to, craft some language. We know this is a big change. We really worked hard to get something that is reasonable and practicable. It was a negotiating game without a doubt with Ohio EPA. So there was I guess you could call it, there was a pretty good compromise between our agencies at the end of the day. So this is important to put on everybody's radar, like I said, because these requirements are going to be coming, specifically the culvert requirements in the nationwide permits in 2026. Okay, so just wanted to mention some options out there for culverts specifically designed to pass aquatic organisms. We have only worked with one particular design here at ODOT. There could be others out there. I'm not aware of them, but this is an I-Series culvert. This particular one we installed in Portage County. We had actually installed two, and this was years ago, like 2018. And then this past summer, we did another one. And like I said, it's called the I-Series culvert. It's designed by Contact. It was tested at Colorado State University. So it's a well-vetted design. And Ohio EPA seems to like these because it encourages, like I said, a passage of aquatic life, natural substrates within the culvert, even though it does have a bottom, but there's kind of these interstitial spaces in between where the substrates can settle, but still continue to move through. So there is a connection with the stream bottom in these spaces, and it also gives different types of habitat for fish and aquatic life to live. Currently, it has functioned to reduce a stream mitigation ratio if that is required on a project. Our goal is to get it to fully satisfy stream mitigation when it is required for a particular crossing. And finally, I want to mention some permitting tips and strategies, related to everything I've talked about in the last 25 minutes. So when you are looking at your project, consider the existing fills, existing impacts when determining if stream mitigation is required. Now, I will say it's not spelled out that way in the nationwide permits currently, that you can eliminate that existing footprint like it is in our regional general permit. However, that is something that, typically the agencies have not required mitigation when there's an existing fill there and you're essentially like replacing that fill. So consider that when you are designing, developing, planning your project. And then also, this is a little more of a proactive approach, but this is something we'll be looking to do at ODOT, is to purchase some advanced mitigation credits and in more watersheds in Ohio. We already do that now, but I think we might want to spread it around a little bit more to hit these kind of lower impact projects where we might have stream mitigation. And then if you have in your culvert inventory, especially for those county engineers, getting a feel for the perch culvert situations in advance of projects, I would highly recommend. That is definitely on Ohio EPA's radar. It's also a requirement with Corps as well that you do not have that condition in the field. And then, as I mentioned, these culvert aquatic organism passage designs, consider those. If you want more information about the I-Series, you can reach out to me and I can provide that. And something that also maybe isn't super intuitive, Ohio EPA, when you have to notify them through their notification process, you're supposed to use the pre-application form in their e-business system. It's not really designed for an application, but that's what they have right now. With hopefully in the future, they could develop an application that's more appropriate for that notification. And then finally, the theme of this whole quick webinar, anticipate similar requirements in the nationwide permits that we have seen in our regional general permit that is going to be authorized here in the next month or so. They have essentially given us that heads up, and I wanted to give this group a heads up. I know there's a lot of different types of people on this webinar, but it's coming, and I wanted to make sure that you guys plan for these new requirements coming your way, because things are looking quite a bit different in the last year or so with the 401 requirements. Okay, with that, that's it for my formal presentation.
And I guess we have lots of questions. Yep.
Oh boy, I hope there's
all right.
Time.
They're just rolling in. So we're going to start with the first one we received. It says, how was the 0.03, I'm guessing AC, is acre limit determined?
Well, that originated with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers headquarters. So their requirement is if you exceed that amount and you're already submitting a PCN to the Corps, you have to mitigate. It wasn't necessarily a trigger to submit a PCN, but it's more of a mitigation trigger when you're already submitting a PCN for another reason. Now, how was that determined? I refer you to the preamble of the nationwide permits to read about that. That's the best source. I don't know how satisfying it will be, honestly. The Corps takes into account a lot of public comments through their nationwide permit process. So I cannot give you a very great answer to that question right now. It started off as 1/10 of an acre and it found its way down to 0.03. So that's a pretty big difference. That's all I got, sorry.
Okay. Well, the next question we have, it says, for the RGP EPA condition concerning the exception for mitigation on maintenance of existing structures, does this mean you still need to automatically notify EPA for impacts greater than 0.03 acres, or is this notification not required because no mitigation is required?
So great question. And that came up in our meetings, and ODOT specifically asked, like, hey, if we're not exceeding the 0.03 for our new permanent impacts, it is not our intent to notify Ohio EPA. So we made that very clear. I would say it's not written in that detail in the certification, but that's how we will be operating. I hope I answered the question. Let me know if I didn't.
Yeah, folks can always feel free to submit like a follow-up question or comment in the question box after Adrienne provides a response. So, all right, next question. Will the culvert requirements be required for only new projects started after a certain date? Or will some projects currently under design but not finalized have to make some changes to meet the new requirements?
Yes, another excellent question, something we talked about with Ohio EPA, because our L&D won't be changed till July, but even so, when, we have projects already in the works, here at ODOT, we're not gonna go backwards. So at some point we have to decide. I think the applicant needs to decide where that cutoff is. So I can't tell you what we've decided quite yet, because this is all pretty new. But I feel like, really, once you get past any preliminary design, it's going to be harder and harder. Once you get into like stage 2, I don't think we're going backwards. So I think that will be up to the applicant how to handle that. Maybe in the future I'll talk about what our decision is there.
All right, next question. How is the 0.03 acres threshold measured, and can you provide some examples?
So, it's basically the length and width of the new stream impact below the ordinary high water mark. I think that's what the question's asking. Essentially you can have 150. So I did a couple quick calculations. You can have 150 feet of impacts on a 10-foot wide stream. You're exceeding that threshold. You can have a 50-foot length impact on a 30-foot wide stream and exceed that threshold. So, it's just a basic area. It's an area-based threshold, but only where, the way ODOT is operating, where new fill is going, where fill did not previously exist.
All right.
Again, and I will say in the future, look for maybe some improved, new and improved impact calculation schematics in our waterway permits manual, probably for the July update.
Great. On the next question, they said, sorry if I missed this, if already addressed, but are there proprietary item issues when using federal funds if, for example, Conspan I-series would be required for a permit?
Well, it's never going to be required for a permit. It's all about what the applicant proposes. So, Ohio EPA or the Corps will never say you got to do an I-series or you have to do a fish passage culvert. But if you don't, you could have more permitting and mitigation requirements. So it's, viewed as an environmentally friendly design method. Like I said, I'm only aware of the I-series here in Ohio. We worked with contact and to be able to utilize this culvert. However, I don't believe it's made its way into our specifications. But I worked with the right contracting folks to be able to use the culvert. And it's really, that is not my area of expertise. So I'm just gonna, I should probably stop talking about it then and there, and follow up if you have more. I can get you to the right people to talk to.
And for everybody's knowledge, Adrienne will be receiving a full spreadsheet of these questions and who asked them. So she can follow up with you, or you can follow up with her directly after the webinar if you need more details. All right, the next question we have is, can you give more detail on purchasing advanced stream mitigation credits?
So that is something that can be done. Like I said, we do it here at ODOT. And, we usually go for the bank as the preferred mitigation option. And so, we look for those first and then in lieu fee. Here at ODOT, we use our state budget money to make these purchases. Otherwise, we have to have project money available. So we usually get some budget money annually to be able to make these advanced purchases, and the Corps is willing to do this. If you have questions about that process, actually, I just met with all 3 Corps districts and a mitigation provider on Monday to talk about how to track that type of purchase and information. So kind of more detailed, so please reach out if you have more questions about it.
All right, will ODOT want to see OEPA notifications for local LEP projects that are using the ODOT permit process if OEPA prefers the pre-application form to be submitted online?
So we do have a way to do that. We have done those for locals. And actually, in the January update, we'll be coming out with a form for our districts, and any local LEP project that wants to use our process can complete. And then it'll make it easier for the Waterway Permits Unit to input that information into the pre-application form. So we actually do it here at ODOT. If that local LEP project's going through our process, we will be the ones in the Waterway Permit Unit to fill out that pre-application form and submit it. It is pretty basic and straightforward. So as long as we get the information we need to fill it out and submit it, that we'll go ahead and do that for you guys.
Okay, and I believe this is a follow-up question. It says that impact calculation is based on bank full width, correct?
It's based off the ordinary high water mark elevation. So, and bank full width is higher than ordinary high typically. So, yep, just use that ordinary high elevation and then your length and your width for your fills to get your area, and that should take care of it.
Okay. If completing a maintenance activity under NWP3, which had a previous impact over the 0.03 acres, and we plan to re-impact the same footprint, do we have to submit notification to EPA, or is this covered as a previous impact?
Well, we're really getting to the weeds here. I do want to be careful how the RGP is worded versus the nationwide permits, right? So because this is not in the current nationwide permits, there's probably going to be some level of interpretation of the applicant for the nationwide permits. Yeah, I guess, but for the future nationwides, if this same language finds its way in there, again, it doesn't specify that you do not include existing impacts to trigger that notification, but that's how we have worked it out with Ohio EPA. Yeah, it's a little, I don't want to say too much here because, I don't want to speak for Ohio EPA and how it's going to look for them with their nationwide certifications, but all I can tell you is how we are doing it here at ODOT. I feel like I didn't really answer that question, and I apologize. So I don't know if you want to restate it, Victoria, or if the individual wants to reach out to me and we can talk about it. Either way works for me.
I think it might be best if they reach out to you, and then maybe you could even reach out to OEPA to see what comments they have on that question.
Yeah, I mean, sure, that works.
Great. this is the last question I have for right now. It says, if we field pave approximately 4 to 6 inches on culvert bottom, what type of coordination will be required?
Well, I will say that generally ODOT looks at that as if it's within the existing culvert. We have been calling that 404 exempt, and that is based off our experience with our core office. That essentially, you're field paving a culvert. Does it matter if it's 2 inches thick or 4 inches thick? I mean, I honestly, I don't really know the answer to that, but I, I think we've decided that when you're taking a culvert with not having a natural bottom and essentially it's artificial and then you're just adding more artificial fill on top, as long as you're maintaining appropriate flows and you're passing substrates and aquatic life and water through that culvert, we're not considering that. We're considering that a 404 exempt activity. Now, what is not 404 exempt is if you need a cofferdam outside that culvert that would go into the stream to dewater the work area to complete the culvert maintenance work. So you couldn't completely get out of a regulated activity because you'd need that temporary cofferdam to dewater the work area.
Great. Nobody else has submitted any further questions. So we really appreciate your time, Adrienne, on this topic. And it, is definitely a critical update that many people needed. So it's wonderful that you were able to provide this.
Sure thing. I wish everything was black and white and straightforward, but unfortunately that is that is not the case in the waterway permits world. But it's a lot to talk about in a short amount of time. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk further.
Wonderful. And we will send Adrienne's contact information out in the follow-up email. Um, what we'll do is, if the recording of the webinar was successful, we'll send that link out along with a link to the slides that were in the handout section. And we did get one additional comment, said, thank you, wonderful presentation, very helpful. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
thank you, Adrienne. I also wanted to ask, our audience that if you have ideas for future webinar topics, please feel free to send them to me. I've put my email in the chat box. It's victoria.beale, B-E-A-L-E, at dot.ohio.gov. So everybody stay warm and safe out there, and we will see you on a future webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.